Hey everybody, Jeff Oriyama here. GraphQL over HTTP is getting support for a new HTTP method, query. Yes, literally, query. And if your first reaction is, wait, HTTP has a query method? That's fair, it's very new. HTTP query was standardized this year, and there's now an open pull request to add support for it to the GraphQL over HTTP specification. I'm pretty excited about this, because GraphQL might be one of the clearest examples of why HTTP query should exist in the first place. I found out about this when Martin on the GraphQL Technical Steering Committee sent me this PR and presented it at a recent GraphQL Working Group meeting. But first, what actually is HTTP query? For most of GraphQL's history over HTTP, we've mostly had two choices for query operations: GET and POST. GET has semantics that are a really nice fit for a GraphQL query. It's safe, it's idempotent. HTTP infrastructure understands that this is a read, and responses can be cached. The annoying part is that with GET, the input has to go into the URL. So you end up encoding the GraphQL document, variables, and potentially other information there. Now that can work, and GraphQL over HTTP supports it today. But GraphQL queries can get pretty substantial, and URLs are not a particularly pleasant container for a whole query language. The other option is POST. POST is convenient because you get a request body. You can put your GraphQL document and variables in a perfectly normal JSON payload, and as a result, POST has become extremely common for GraphQL queries. But POST has much weaker semantics from HTTP's point of view. If some proxy or cache or other piece of infrastructure sees post/GraphQL, it doesn't know whether that request is reading data or changing data. You and your GraphQL server might know that the document inside the body contains a query operation, but HTTP itself doesn't know that. Now, the GraphQL over HTTP specification has affordances for that, but again, it's not built into the semantics of HTTP itself. Query fills that really interesting hole. It gives you a request body, like POST, while the HTTP method itself is defined as safe and idempotent, like GET. Its responses can also be cached, so you can send your GraphQL document and variables in the body without giving up the HTTP semantics that describe this as a safe read. Before I go further, there's one piece of terminology worth clearing up. This change is happening in the GraphQL over HTTP specification, not the core GraphQL specification. GraphQL itself defines the language, like queries and mutations and subscriptions, the type system, execution semantics, all that stuff. It deliberately leaves transport largely unspecified. GraphQL over HTTP is the separate specification that standardizes how GraphQL clients and servers communicate when HTTP is the transport, which is extremely common. Once you separate those two things, I think the reason this change is interesting becomes clearer. GraphQL already has a semantic distinction between a query and a mutation. A query is supposed to be read-only, a mutation is where side effects are allowed. But today, if both of those arrive as POST requests, that distinction disappears at the HTTP layer. You have to open the envelope and inspect the GraphQL operation before you know which one you're looking at. With HTTP query, the transport can start expressing a distinction that GraphQL has had all along. And that's the part I find genuinely elegant. And to answer the obvious question, no, POST is not going away. The pull request is explicit that HTTP query must not be used to execute mutation operations, because HTTP query is defined as safe. A GraphQL mutation may cause side effects, so POST remains the appropriate method there. The proposal does go in a fairly opinionated direction for query operations, though. Where query is supported, it becomes the preferred method for executing GraphQL queries. That gives HTTP infrastructure useful information before GraphQL execution even begins. A proxy can know it's looking at a safe request without parsing GraphQL. Retry logic can know that repeating the request is safe. Caches can reason about it as a query request, and we can get those semantics without cramming a giant GraphQL operation into a URL. And I think that's the real appeal here. GraphQL has spent years living with an awkward trade-off where GET had the semantics we wanted and POST had the request shape we wanted. HTTP query gives us both. There are still practical details to work through. HTTP query is new, so clients, servers, frameworks, reverse proxies, CDNs, and caches all have to learn how to handle it correctly. Caching is also more involved than with a normal GET because the request body matters to the cache key. So I would not interpret any of this as, great, change every GraphQL client tomorrow. But I do think this is one of those protocol changes where you look at it alongside GraphQL and immediately wonder why we didn't have it before. According to the most recent GraphQL working group, we're hoping that autumn 2027 is the time where users can expect this to be published into the GraphQL over HTTP spec. There's time. That means there's still time to influence how this lands. So if you build GraphQL clients and servers, proxies, gateways, caches, whatever, please do take a look at the proposal. Try to break it. Think about the infra that you operate and whether the semantics make sense there. This is exactly the point in a specification process where useful feedback matters, and I'll link the pull request below. If you're enjoying these specification updates, don't forget to like and share the video. That's it for now. See you next time.